Hey, this is Tyrone with the Good Frank and the Local Meat Club. And I'm making this video very quickly because I've been telling people for the last couple of weeks that that meat shortages and price spikes are inevitable. And I just realized that most people cannot follow my logic. My experience building my own supply line and raising crops and being at the level of the farmer for our own sausage business, the Good Frank, has allowed us to see how the food industry works all the way across, like from the farm to the retail or end user. And there are certain things that I just understand that I take for granted. And when I say that, I realize that when I say that there's going to be meat shortages and price spikes, most people can accept that, especially if they're like the conspiracy type that understand that everything is moving us toward a one world totalitarian government. They can understand that, but they don't necessarily understand how I arrived at that conclusion. And so I just want to take this time to explain the kind of the logical steps and the principles that are unavoidable that we are in the midst of watching play out. So if we were to look at this circumstance, there's kind of two things that you really have to understand and have a firm grasp on in order to really understand what's going on. The first thing that you have to really understand is a customer. You have to understand that no business can exist without a customer. A customer creates the demand for every business. A customer is why a business exists, and business exists to try to fulfill the needs of the customer. The business also tries to estimate what the needs are, and the most successful businesses get very close to providing exactly what the customer needs and how much the customer needs. Companies like Walmart have literally dominated their field because of their inventory management. When put in a different way, all it is literally being able to have exactly what the customer needs when they need it. And that's done through a complicated system that averages or predicts inventory demand or customer demand. So that's the first principle that you have to understand. Every business has a customer, and that customer dictates what the business does by and through demand. The second thing that's really important to understand is that the business have fixed costs. Okay, so like no matter what happens, whether you sell anything or find a customer or don't find a customer, there are certain costs that are ongoing. And so if you have, let's say you have 10 customers, right? And you have something called rent, and that rent is $10. Well, I wish I could find that place, but let's say the rent is $10 and you have 10 customers over the month of a period or the period of a month. Then rent works out to $1 per customer. So each customer carries $1 worth of rent. If that's for me, I actually wanted a large. Was that the unsweet and the lemonade? Huh? They always say Troy. It's just a French fry. It's Tyrone. Okay, good. All right, so great. Avoided a disaster there. So the customers, let me get my mind back there. Okay. So rent would be covered by the amount of sales that you have. So whatever the customer demands, that customer's business actually provides for the fixed cost of the business. This is oversimplification, but it's important that you understand this. If rent is $10 and there's 10 customers, every customer carries $1. Now let's say if rent is $10, which doesn't change, but there are only 5 customers, then every customer has to carry $2 in rent. Do you see that? How with less customers, the amount of the fixed cost that each customer carries goes up. With the more customers, the amount of the fixed cost that each customer carries goes down. So that generally means my thing kind of went down in the I might be, if that's just a French fry and an unsweet tea with lemonade, that's me. All right. Oh, thank you. I'm glad it didn't go down in there. Hey. Thank you, you too. And so, sorry about that. So the whole thing is, you need to understand this because it's going to shed light on why there's going to be price spikes and why there's going to be meat shortage. So let's continue on. Customers. We're talking about, yours by now have started to see the articles that are talking about farmers euthanizing their pigs, killing chickens, burying milk, and all this other stuff. You've probably started to see that by now. And I'm going to explain why that is the case and how that has to do with the meat shortages that are coming, and also how I could see this weeks ago coming. All right, so let's say, customer. Who are the customer of the farmer? This is where you have to start. Who's the customer of the farmer? The customers for most farmers are meat packers. Meat packers, or the slaughterhouses, are where the farmers take their meat in order to put it into the food system. All right, so the meat packers, they buy meat directly from the farmers, and then they take the meat that they have bought and they distribute it out to grocery stores or to food service chains or to other manufacturers. Okay, so the farmers supply their customers, which are the meat packers, with the live animals, and the meat packers make meat from the live animals. So let's continue the chain. Who are the customers of the meat packers? The meat packers perform this service for the grocery stores, for food manufacturers, and eventually for the brokers that supply restaurants. All right, so now we find out that meat packers customers are grocery stores, food service operations, and restaurants. Okay, so they have three kind of distinct customer groups. Now, all of the food that we've been buying, these supply chains have been in existence as long as there have been grocery stores. They supply the grocery stores, the food service restaurants, or food service operations, and the restaurants. Okay, so now let's look at what has happened. On March 15th in Ohio, the governor jumped up and said that restaurants can no longer serve people. That food service operations like football stadiums, like hospitals, like corporate cafeterias, they can no longer serve or seat people. So overnight, the meat packers lost 2 out of their 3 customer bases. Follow me. But those 2 or 3 customer bases they created the demand that they gave to the farmers. Does that make sense? So before DeWine made this announcement, the farmers were producing enough meat to supply the meat packers with enough meat to supply all 3 customer groups. But now overnight, 2 of the customer groups didn't need meat. So what happens to the meat that was coming? As this information goes through the chain that, hey, we don't need 2/3 of the meat that we had the month before. The farmer gets this news, but the farmer's already raising the meat. That was going to be, that was the 3/3 that he was supposed to be putting through the system. So he finds out overnight that they don't need 2/3 of the meat that he's already raising. So what happens when you find out that you've already invested in raising, let's say 100 cows, but you only need 33 of them? What happens? You've still already spent the money for the 100 cows. You've already spent that money. You may have invested heavily in feed. You may have gotten a loan based on those 100 cows, but you're only going to make money from 34 of them. All right, so the thing is, those 34 are at minimum going to have to pay for the loan that you got. So what happens? If the meat packer calls you and tells you that, automatically your price jumps. Why? Because the fixed costs, here it goes, the fixed costs to supply those 100 cows or 100 pigs was based on 100, on selling 100. The fixed costs are not going to change, but if you only sell 34, they have to go up in order to meet the fixed costs. You understand? So let's say the fixed cost was $100 to raise 100 pigs. If you only sell 34 of them, then you still have to pay for the 100 pigs that you were planning on raising, which means that your cost for each pig that you sell moves up from $1 to $4 in order to cover your costs. Now, this $4 cost, this automatic price increase, gets passed on to the meat packer. So the meat packer knows by cutting his supply by 2/3, he's actually going to cause the price of his product to go up. So what does he do? He delays making that order as long as possible. So he's going to ration out the meat that he has in storage. He's not going to send it all out, but he's going to ration it, and then he's going to raise the price on the meat that he's sending to the stores, to the grocery stores, and to the restaurants that are still open. He's going to raise the price to absorb the price hikes that he's going to face when he reorders from the farmer. This is where the price hikes come from. They are inevitable. The other aspect is him trying to make what he has in his warehouse make more money, is where the price shortages come from. He wants to stretch the meat that he has out as long as possible because he realizes that his farmer does not know what to make. His farmers, he may put farmers out of business. There may not be another supply of meat for a while, and no matter if he finds the supply of meat, the cost is going to go up. So he wants to hold on to the meat that he has for as long as possible in hopes that this situation blows over. But at the same time that he's holding on, he realizes that he has to get as much money out of that meat as possible. So he's calling his people, that his customers, and telling them, hey, effective immediately, our price has gone up by $3. When they complain, he says, okay, find meat somewhere else. You can't find it anywhere else, so you're forced to pay the extra price. Then what happens? The grocery store, as soon as they put the meat out, they tell you, hey, the price has gone up. Why? Because they have to pay more for the meat. This is why we're experiencing price hikes through the food system. It is also why there will be shortages, because the meat brokers, the meat plants, and the meat, the grocery stores will be rationing their supply to make sure that they can get the highest price for the volume that they have. This whole thing falls right back on the farmer. The farmer is the person that will feel the brunt of this pain, because they usually went into an enormous amount of debt in order to finance those original 100 pigs that they never were able to sell. And so what Trump is doing by keeping the meat packers open, forcing them to be open, when there's no demand from the restaurants, the restaurants aren't open. So the meat packers don't have the demand to give to the farmers. It's not going to help anything. All the meat packers are going to do is slaughter the unused meat, and they may pay them for that. But you got to understand that during the next production cycle, the meat farmers are not going to trust the numbers coming out of the meat packers. They're not going to make capacity. So there will be shortages until the demand is proven. And this is the problem. It's the way the market adjusts naturally. And most people don't understand it, but it's what we're facing. This is why the local meat club is so important, for two reasons. The first reason is the people that we're dealing with are indebted. That's the first reason. They're not facing enormous amounts of debt, which cause their meat prices to jump up. We're not indebted. Our farmers aren't indebted. The meat packers aren't indebted. So we don't have that debt system that forces the price of meat up. The second thing is that we know the end user demand before we ever slaughter the meat. So the farmers and the customers are actually in direct communication. So there's no mystery. And the customers buy the meat before it's slaughtered. So in this way, we don't have this supply line bottleneck where there's the guessing and the instability. We know exactly how much meat is going to be consumed, so we know exactly how much to produce. This is kind of the model of the future, but right now we need to expand our system, bring in more members so we can buy more live cattle, so that we can actually be a safety valve for when the stores do start to experience these severe shortage and severe meat price hikes. I hope that explained, and I hope that was helpful in explaining what we're looking at in terms of the meat system. And it's my thoughts on it. And concerning like a lot of these conspiracy theorists that are talking about, or conspiracy folks that are talking about AI technology and all that, yes, the government is using AI technology, but they're using it to try to figure out the demand so they can understand exactly what's going on between the farm and the customer. You have to realize these are private companies, and many of them are a part of the cabal network, and so their numbers may not be accurate. But by getting the information from the end user and also seeing what the farmers are producing, they can put together an efficient supply line. Whether or not that's being used for good or evil, I cannot say yet. I don't know. But I do know we need to remove all these people from our food system, because they have done nothing but poison us over years. And they've been willing to create this system where they're willing to sacrifice you and your freedoms at the drop of a dime. So God bless you guys. This is Tyrone with The Good Frank. I hope I made that clearer about the customer, about the carrying cost. Oh, that's the other thing I forgot to mention. Just very, very quickly. The debt. Most farmers are deeply, deeply in debt because they have to finance the pigs. The meat packers are deeply in debt because they have to finance these huge factories. The grocery stores are deeply in debt because they have to finance this huge rollout. What this means when there's a collapse of demand is that financing is drying up. And what we're starting to see is that the financing is moving, because these are all cabal networks. It's moving into artificial meats, lab-created meats. It's almost as if they're trying to collapse the food infrastructure. So that's why I say dealing with us with the local meat club is so essential, because you sidestep all of that. All right, God bless you. Take care. Tyrone Jackson with The Good Frank and the local meat club.